In this video, we're going to see how we can work with buttons on our canvas. So we're starting here with a hero banner that has two buttons, as you can see here, get started and learn more. And so what we can do is we can just select this button on the left here, and that will open up in our styles panel here on the right. And you'll see here we have three options that are specific to the button link element. The first of which is the title. Now, as you can see here, when I hover over the word title, a little tooltip appears that says title. This is what the title does on a button. When you hover over it, it will show you some additional information. It's also what screen readers will read for vision impaired. So what we can do in here is type some additional information related to the link we have. So we don't want to type in get started. What we might type in, let's say that the get started link goes to our course directory. So in the title bar, we might type something like view all courses or something a little bit more descriptive like that. Second, we have the link. So in here is where we would paste the link of the actual destination. So you might go copy that from your Teachable School, and that will end up looking something like this. And we can hit enter, and that will key that in there on the button. And then the third option we have here is the target, and we have two options here, this window or new window. This window is just standard default web browsing. If we click that get started button, it'll just go to the next page in the same window. If we click new window, when we click that get started button, that'll open in a new window or a new tab. Okay, so now underneath there, we can start to look at the options for styling and spacing of our button. So first we have the layout, and here is where we can put margin, top, right, bottom, and left, which will space the button in relation to everything else. We have padding, which is actually the space inside the element. So for example, if we put 20 on that, we'll see that get a little bit bigger, and we can make it the same on the bottom as well. And you can see that gives us a little bit of height, and we can see that's now bigger than the other button on the right. We can do a few more options under here, floating and change the position, etc. That's our layout. Then we can get into typography, and so here we can actually start to change the font. We can make that Georgia. We can change the font size as well, up and down here. You'll see if we drag that. Change the font weight, so we might want to make that bold, as we'll see here, spacing, the color, and a few more options there. Then we can get into the background color. So we might want to make this a big green button. So here we've got a green that I've used previously. And we can play around and drag that color around and drag the color spectrum slider here on the right to move that around. Click OK when we're done. And then you've got a few other options that you can play with there as well. Then you might want to add a border. So for example, we've got a blue border here, which was the initial color. We might want to make that white just to make that really stick out. You can play here with some different types of borders as well. You might go dotted, might go dashed, and if we unselect that, you can see there. And here we've got some interesting options like drop shadows. So for example, if you want to make this stand off the page a little bit, we can add a box shadow, and you've got your H and V, which are horizontal and vertical points from where the shadow originates. And here we've got our blur. So if we just make that a bit bigger, we can slide that up and we'll see that blur start to really push out there of the button. So we can make that around 30, something like that. And then you've got the color here as well. So what we would usually do is drop the opacity there so it's not so harsh, but you can still see a little bit of a shadow there. And we can click OK. And we can deselect, and there you can see a green button with a different font and a dashed border and a little bit of a drop shadow. So now we can change the hover effect. So if we select that button again and we come up here into the top right where it says default, we can select, and the second option there is hover. So we'll select that. Now everything in the styles panel here now will be related to the hover event. So we might go in and change the background and say, okay, on hover, we want that to be something like let's try and get a yellow here just for a big contrast. And we might say, okay, on hover, the color might go green. Just so we can really see the difference here. And then another nice effect is we can actually darken that shadow on hover. So we might say that's the same blur, but it's really dark, as we can see there. And there you go. We can now move that back to default. And now what we can do is click on preview. And when we hover over, we'll see the button goes yellow, the text goes green, and our shadow really darkens as well. That's how we can play with our buttons.